Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to These Go to 11. Once again, I'm Nathan Bell. Joining me, as always, Mr. Zach Bartle. Zach, what's going on, man?
Dude, I just figured out the best way to cook corn on the cob in a hurry.
Really?
Yeah, and that is to wrap it in damp paper towel and microwave it for 5 minutes. Boom, life hack. Everybody,
nice.
You're welcome.
Nice. That is great. We've done that before with sweet potatoes when we've been in a hurry. Yep. So works with corn on the cob too. I'll have to remember that.
Dude, where were sweet potatoes, by the way? Like when we were kids, like there was like the crappy like dog foodish yams in a can that some weird relative would bring to Thanksgiving with marshmallows on top. But like an actual sweet potato, like I thought I hated sweet potatoes until like 2006, and then someone was like, here's an actual sweet potato,
right,
and put a little butter on it, and a little bit of cinnamon and sugar or some sour cream, and it's delicious.
It's amazing, isn't it? Yeah. No, I agree. Like, I mean, growing up in New Hampshire, I heard the term sweet potato before, but never knew what it was. I mean, and like, in all fairness, in my house, we enjoyed the taste of food. So like, we didn't have like the yams and things like that. Like, we had the good stuff at Thanksgiving. So, I wasn't exposed to sweet potatoes until I married my wife and came to live in Maryland, which I guess it's definitely more of a southern thing, that sweet potato casserole. So,
yucks.
Yep. So we have some exciting news from Mission Aware. I was just talking with Jeff today. Actually, I'm going to have to go in and edit what will be last week's podcast because we're recording this one a week ahead of time. But, you know, this is all part of the recording business and letting people in behind the screen, as it were, as to how we do things. But for basically when this drops, there will be, I think, 5 days until Father's Day. And so Mission Aware is running a promo for us. If you go into Mission Aware and order your stuff and you order $50 or more, they'll give you $10 off of your purchase by entering the code TGT11. These go to 11, so TGT11. So don't forget to check out Mission Aware for great Father's Day stuff, and then I'll also make sure I go in and put the edit in. That's more for your info, Zach, than anyone else's. But hey, I don't do a lot of work on this podcast, so I may just leave all this stuff in there.
Raw. It's
That's
like,
right.
Remember Sugar in the Raw?
That's right. Sugar in the Raw.
You know what that was, though, dude? They wanted you to think it was, like, unprocessed. They actually remove the molasses, and then they go back and put it back in.
Right. Yeah, well,
so it's not even raw.
Yeah.
The 90s were one big lie in that way.
Well, we've really just carried all that stuff over, though. I mean, come on. The whole organic craze and kick that goes on, you know, I mean, everybody's like, oh, yeah, you know, you'll live 10 years longer if you eat organic and you eat healthy. And, you know, it turns out that, you know, doesn't matter whether you're eating organic or not, you know, you get the same amount of chemicals and processing in your system as if you don't. So,
Well, Nathan, I mean, you're a science guy. You realize that the only thing that we consume that's not organic is salt, right? Yeah. Anything carbon-based is
right.
Organic.
Right.
I always say that to people. I'm like, oh, yeah, this is organic hot dog. Really? Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the pig it came from, definitely a carbon-based life form.
That's great. Although, if you saw Evan's post, according to Evan, even as a Christian, even though, I teach science, I don't think so. You know, did you?
Oh, I didn't see that.
Oh,
no.
You didn't? Oh, yeah. He threw up a Twitter thing. Basically, nailing us. It was something to the effect of, it doesn't matter, these two guys, can't knock them off the, scripture script, and, apparently all thought goes out the window when the Bible's involved and all that stuff. So,
yeah.
Well,
can't wait to have that gentleman back on, because that wasn't a really dry, boring episode at all.
I know, right? That's exactly what I was thinking, was like, wow, I actually thought we gave him a lot to think about and chew on, but
I feel like the one after it, where we kind of analyzed it, was the meat there.
Yeah.
The organic meat.
Yeah. Which,
you know what, though? Scratch that. On another definition. And this will let you know just how much I want to talk about Evan. Hot dogs really aren't organic, because like lips and hooves aren't organs.
Oh, fascinating. Right. Because they're, what are
Miscellaneous. I don't know what the.
I forget the technical term. Like, I'm winding down to the end of the year, so all my brain functions are slowly turning off.
You turned those off when you became a Christian. Who are you kidding?
Dude, that was awesome. Oh man. Well, speaking of not thinking, we do our best work when we don't think. So in that vein, we actually have several questions that people have asked us. So we are going to take our time and answer some of those.
Well, you gave me a lot of time to chew them over, Nathan.
Dude, I love to give you the maximum prep time possible when it comes to this podcast.
In other words, I'm getting them now.
What was it? Hour ago? Half hour ago?
And the nice thing is, like, don't think, react, man.
That's right.
Do that.
That's right.
I'm in danger of overthinking it. Really, I am. I'm a guy who will overthink stuff.
Oh, so it works out better if I just kind of send you things last minute.
Probably. I reserve the right to grouse about it, though, like a man in the sliding into the back nine of his life.
That's right. Oh, fair enough, man. Fair enough. Well, this first set of questions we have is from our good buddy Tyler. He's sent in several, and I love his opener. I feel like I keep writing in topic suggestions, but you guys keep recording them, so I'll keep writing. And we love it. Don't forget that you can let us know about different suggestions you have one of two ways, preferably the one of two ways. Either you can go on to the website, the Podcast 11 website, and there's a section set up about sending in questions for us, or you can go to these go to 11, all spelled out, then the number 15 at gmail.com, and you can write them in as well. And I've had several other questions come in through the These Go to 11 Facebook page and Twitter and all that as well. So there are a number of ways you can get it. The fastest is going to be one of those two. Tyler's question is, can you guys talk about Christian influences in your life, possibly under the following format: a historical Christian who has influenced you and how and why, a current modern Christian, someone you don't know who has influenced you and how and why, and a Christian you know personally who has influenced you, how and why. So, Zach, since I gave you the least amount of time, I'm going to let you go first.
Well, that makes a ton of sense.
But I don't think, remember, so.
Right. Oh, man. Are we starting with the, why don't we go back and forth topic by topic?
I think that sounds good. We'll start with the historical figure. And I've got a couple of these. I'm sure you do too, but we'll start with...
I refuse to limit it to one.
Yeah.
I can't play favorites. In fact, I probably could do a weekly podcast of historical Christians that have helped form my theology and my identity that were, and go for 3 years.
Yes.
So,
yes,
I
absolutely.
just have to go with whoever pops into my mind. And then they're, just so you know, they will absolutely all be stereotypical, like what you'd expect from a guy like me.
Sure.
I'd say first and foremost, predictably, the Reverend Charles Haddon Spurgeon. The thing with this guy, the only downside, all right, we know he wasn't sinless because he was definitely a guy who struggled a little with gluttony. Mm-hmm. He wrote a little about that, and other than that, there's something, when you talk about like, I love John Calvin, which I do. And then someone's like, hey, look at this writing where John Calvin's like, burn the witches. And I'm like, dang it. People can bring up with historical figures these things that are tied to the time and place they lived and go, they should have known better. And I'm like, well, I can't say they shouldn't have known better.
Right.
But Spurgeon is one of these guys. Like, one time, I think I came across one thing in his writings where I was like, that sounds like a smidge racist, but he doesn't mean it that way. Mm-hmm. Like, people in the South burned his sermons because he was such an abolitionist. So he wasn't racist, but it was something like, if an Ethiopian skin could be made perfectly white, and then he referenced the quote improvement. And I'm like, yikes, but that's it. Like, that's right. The thing. That's the one thing. He had no mistresses. He had no weird stuff. It's nice to just have someone who's already dead and buried, who I know next week He's not going to have a big thing blow up where
Right.
he was texting with someone, and it got all lurid.
Yeah.
It's, if 5 years ago I might have said Tullian Tchividjian, and then you wind up looking embarrassed or whatever.
Right.
Spurgeon is one of these guys that was so completely 100% Jesus all the time, but not in the way where you like neglect your family or something. I mean, just the kind of pastor that all of us Baptist pastors today know we won't succeed at being, but it doesn't hurt to try. In fact, it helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I keep on reading his sermons. I read morning, and I've been through morning and evening so many times that it's starting to lose its impact because I kind of know this stuff by heart. There's only 365 times 2. If you were smarter, I'd ask you what that is, but obviously.
Obviously,
and then
I
when
checked
we were
my brain at the door.
Yeah. When we were at Doc and Devo, they were giving away the lost sermons of Spurgeon, which are apparently now found. And it's like 4 volumes, and I think it was Crossway was doing it.
Oh, wow.
And I was coveting that. And it was based on hashtagging Doc and Devo. And I was like, my phone started to melt. I was hashtagging them so much, and I didn't get it. But it's all right. I don't think in my lifetime I'll ever be able to read through all of the extant pre-lost sermons of Spurgeon. So I really appreciate everything about that guy's writing, his ministry, his letters to my students. It feels like having a mentor, a famous mentor who really is, and there's a danger to that. And we've talked a little about that before. That Porn and Paper Passage article I referenced that Dan Phillips wrote had to actually kind of help me rein that in a little bit at one point.
Yep.
But man, do I love that guy's stuff. And I will never, I can say confidently, get tired of starting a day with a big dose of Spurgeon.
Yeah, nice. I think there's 2 things that I want to say before I mention who mine is. One is, I think it's safe to say that probably everyone that we're going to mention is not going to be from the Bible. Like, we're assuming people outside of the inspired Word of God, and that's. I just want to throw that out there.
Jesus, and I said Spurgeon.
Yeah.
Oh no.
I just want to throw that out there because I think I don't want to get an email or a text or anything and be like, well, you didn't mention Paul, or it's like okay. And the second thing is,
he was a misogynist.
Yeah. He was also for slavery. Come on. I want to say that, but then the second thing I want to say is I think there's going to be a lot of overlap between who you say and who I say, because I would agree with everything you said about Spurgeon 100%. I love reading his stuff. I have on my Kindle this little book called it's like quotes by Spurgeon, and it's just sections of stuff that he wrote from different sermons that he wrote, and it's just a great little book that I have. But the one that I'm going to mention now is going to be St. Augustine. I steal one of yours, you steal one of mine. Fine. Okay, fair enough. This shows you how much prep goes into this.
Now, Nathan, can I just real briefly say St. Augustine is a city, and St. Augustine is a foundational member of the Christian Church?
Fair enough.
What an insufferable douche I am.
So Augustine, happy. I remember the first time reading the Confessions and just loving it, just being blown away by his honesty, just going through from birth until I didn't read the whole thing, just up to his conversion. I think there are like 66 books or something like that in the Confessions, and up into his conversion is like 20 or something like that, book 20 or something like that. I can't exactly remember.
Those are rough, man.
And they are, and they can be. But I was so impressed by it and enjoyed it so much. I actually incorporated it when I taught Bible into one of my Bible classes, and we would go through the Confessions together. And so we would actually take the time to read them in class and let the students ask, well, what does he mean by this? And, the section where he talks about, being sinful, from birth. It, to me, is just a great section to help. It was a great section to help my students realize, that we're not born perfect, that we are born with sin. And it's important to understand that sin doesn't, develop as we get older and we become wiser to the world, that we are born with this sin nature. And so, we need Christ through every aspect of our life. It's not just this one, this point once we reach a certain age that, all of a sudden now I need Christ in my life. No. We need Christ always, from birth, from cradle to the grave. And for me, it was great, helping them realize that. And it was good too, because, a lot of kids nowadays think they're raw and cutting edge and, they're sneaky and all that stuff. And, I'm going to try to do, the crazy thing. And like reading through his confessions, it's like, guys, he was doing all the same stuff that if you're not doing now, it's the stuff that you're thinking about doing. And you're trying to get the edge on and, put that one up. And it's like, these are the things that he's doing. And he realizes that he needs a savior. This is why he needs a savior, because he's just depraved completely and utterly. And so, for me, that was, one of the greats and one of the things that I loved about, teaching to my students and using, that book in particular with it. That's the one that I'm going to mention, and I'm sure you have a couple others that you could mention too, Zach. So I'm going to let you do that real quick.
Yeah, and with Augustine, one of my favorite things is just how it's not, and I have no problem with and love and celebrate and like to hear about these conversions where it's just like boom, all at once. Mm-hmm. I had a guy at my church just now got saved. We had a huge drug problem. I'm baptizing him this Sunday.
Nice.
He's going to give his testimony. This guy was on the way to being dead, hit bottom, got saved, and it's been a couple months, and the desire for drugs is gone, right?
That's great.
My pastor growing up, not growing up, my pastor in college, when I was doing my internships and stuff, he said people knew he got saved the next day or something was up with him because he used to curse like a sailor. Then he went to Fisher Body where he worked, and all of a sudden he wasn't swearing. And I'm like, geez, that didn't happen with me.
Right.
I mean, I got saved when I was a little kid, but, I still struggle with the old tongue.
Right.
And Augustine's one of those, one of these, Lord, give me chastity, but not yet. Kind of always ever on the cusp of, my mom's into this. I kind of assume I'm going to be. I'm kind of believe. And then he has that, the take and read and a real conversion experience. And the desire to sin doesn't just go away all at once. It's a very real, very relatable kind of thing. He's fallen and he's probably jacked up. He's built some neural pathways that need to be filled in.
Right.
It takes some time, and it's encouraging to read. One of the great theologians, and most of the great theologians in his time period are North Africans,
right?
And so that's also an interesting thing. But for one of these great theologians from kind of what was one of the hotbeds of Christian thought at the time, at the same time as he's laying out these amazing doctrines, he's like the Abraham of Christianity, right? I mean, everyone points back to him. Yeah. Roman Catholics, Augustine, Calvinists. Luther was an Augustinian monk, and he maintained all this. The Orthodox could take or leave him, mostly leave him. But
right.
It's amazing to me that he was a regular guy with struggles, and that's just, to me, that's really encouraging.
Yeah. No, I agree 100% because it's interesting because I look at scripture and I read through books like Daniel, or I read Joseph, and it's like thinking about, you don't see the struggles that they went through. And I mean, you see the struggles, the physical struggles, but the spiritual struggles, it seems to come more easily and naturally for them to just turn to God immediately throughout things. And so I always say I would love to be, like Daniel, but I identify a lot more with David, where everything is just right out there and, the things that he does, it's very reactionary, and it's not all wholly reactionary. And so, like I said, I love to be Daniel where that's what I'm striving for, but most closely identify with David. So very cool.
Did you ever read Cliff Graham's Lion of War books?
No, I haven't yet. That's on my to-do list.
Do that this summer, man.
Yeah.
Holy crap, they will blow your mind. I mean, insight into, using a combination of insane amounts of research and travel and just a crazy level of expertise and all this stuff.
Nice.
With the military mindset and experience.
Yeah.
Getting inside the head of Daniel and his mighty men, the Gibborim. That I can't read the Bible the same after reading those, and then going on an Israel trip with Cliff,
right.
and seeing these places and stuff.
Nice.
But okay, let me actually move on to my second guy, and all of mine. I just realized I got 3 in my mind, and they're all Baptist. So I got I'm representing,
there
as they
go.
say, as the kids used to say.
Boom.
Sometime. The second would be Dr. John Clark, and I know fewer people will be familiar with him. He's a very early American Baptist. If you don't know the history of the Baptist Church, started in England. There was great persecution under Archbishop Laud and the Anglican Church. Persecution of any nonconformists, including Puritan separatists and Baptists. So they all got in boats and came here. We all know about that, right? And when they arrived, you'd think they'd be like, wow, so it feels really bad when you're persecuted as a minority religious group, so let's not do it. Only that's not how it happened at all. They were like, now that we're in charge,
right.
we get to decide who to persecute, and the most obvious people were the Baptists. So the Baptists were horribly persecuted. This guy named Roger Williams, the first Baptist in America that we know of, founded the First Baptist Church. He went and he was banished from Massachusetts Bay Colony, bought some land from Native Americans, which was an odd thing to do, and started a little settlement called Providence.
Yep.
With the crazy notion, this Baptist notion, that it's not a place where only his stripe of Christianity is safe and everybody else is thrown in the stocks, rather the notion of religious toleration. Then, now the reason he's not my big hero is because he was only Baptist for like 25 minutes. I'm exaggerating a bit, but he went from Anglican to Puritan to Separatist to Baptist, and he wound up a seeker, which means he's like, I don't think there is a church. The apostles failed, etc. Very kind of a downer.
Right.
But then this other guy came in named John Clark. He was a lawyer, educated, member of whatever the British version of the bar is, probably the bar, I don't know. He was a physician, and he was a theologian and pastor. I mean, just like amazing. This guy's just mind-blowing. And he came to Providence for a while, and he liked what they were doing. He liked the vibe, and he wound up founding Newport, which is also in Rhode Island.
Yep.
And his church is the Second Baptist Church in America. Actually, I have a copy of an old book, probably from the late 19th century, very ardently making a case that his church is really the First Baptist Church, as if that matters so much. And in the back of it has this awesome little advertisement for this weird like steel contraption that a pastor can wear that will straighten his back and make his voice better. I don't know why I'm telling you that. Maybe I'll shoot you a graphic of that. You can throw it up on the show notes.
Let's see if we can get someone to send it to you, and you can use it, when you preach again.
If somebody will make the prototype, we'll kickstart this thing.
That's right.
It definitely doesn't look like it would eventually like break your back or anything. But what's so cool is that he continued to be a pastor. He continued to be like the town doctor and barrister or whatever. I don't know how quickly we moved away from a British thought of legal system. And then they all wanted to make sure. Ann Hutchinson also came in, and so we have in front of Portsmouth. So Rhode Island, what is now Rhode Island, was this little enclave of religious toleration. Like this weird idea. You could have a Quaker meeting house next to a Baptist church, next to a Puritan church, next to an Anglican church, and nobody's trying to kill or jail or anything each other.
Right.
We take that for granted and think, oh, it's American, but it was the Baptists who brought that.
Right.
People give all the credit to like Freemasons and deists, but they were just grabbing our idea and running with it.
Right.
So anyway, he wanted to make sure that they were legit, because if they're not legit, then at any point somebody could just come in and France could be like, whoa, this is ours, blah blah. No crown has claimed us. So he went back to England. And if you know anything about 17th century England, I mean, it's a mess. He goes back to try and get a king to sign a charter for this to be British land. Now, the reason they felt comfortable with it is because they'd paid the Native Americans. They knew it wasn't England's to give, but they also knew without this charter, having bought the land wasn't very valuable. So he spent 13 years in England, and you've got this back and forth. If you look at the history of it, going way back, it's
right.
Bloody Mary, Elizabeth, Thomas, Cromwell, you got Cranmer, so basically he just rides it out, and eventually I think it's Charles II signs this charter, which maintained. You can tell I taught a class on this a couple weeks ago, which remained the Constitution of the state of Rhode Island until like 1862 or something crazy like that. And he comes back basically like victorious. Like he called it. The king called it a lively, Livelie, lively experiment. Like this, he was just like, well, we'll treat it like a reality show. Why not try having absolute religious freedom? Even for, and this was written in the early Baptist books, even, and this was a crazy idea, for popish people and for pagans and for those who have no religious faith at all, for Jews and Muslims. And so, that's why we see in those Rhode Island settlements the first synagogue and all this stuff. So I think if I could do anything to improve the PR and the name of Baptists in America today, it would be to make everyone learn about Dr. John Clark and say that's the historic spirit of being Baptist.
Yeah.
Not what you see, people out there with protest signs,
right?
Who truly did check their brain at the door and replaced it with some sort of teenage angst.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think. Just somebody who's willing to see it through.
Yeah.
13 years with one goal in mind. I would have quit. He didn't.
Yep.
And when he got back, kept on pastoring that church. He didn't want to become some big, huge deal. And very few people know who he was. He doesn't care.
Yeah.
I mean, this was what he wanted to do with his life. And man, especially, as a pastor of, if you'd asked me when I was 19, hey, when you're 40, where are you going to be? I would have probably said, well, I'm going to be pastor in, let's see, 40. I'll probably be on my third church, and I'll probably be 7,000 members. And I've grown since then.
Right.
And I really want to keep that heart that says, no, just plotting visionary, man. Keep every day, be faithful.
Yeah. And
with what you're given and with what you want to accomplish, what you think God would have you accomplish. So, hey, that's my number 2. Go ahead.
Nice. And one thing that I was just going to say is, it's fascinating because when you go back and you look throughout, particularly early American history, and I think it behooves us not to idealize early American history and culture. I mean, there are tons of problems that can be pointed to. But one of the things, again, coming off the heels of the discussion that we had with Evan is the fact that when you look back, and checking your brains at the door, I mean, all of the early American institutes for learning were founded by Christians. Like
most of them as seminaries and schools to train ministers. Harvard, Yale, Brown was a Baptist school for training ministers. Absolutely, yeah.
And so you can't get over that fact. That all of these establishments that we have in existence today were a direct result of these people who believed that it was education and their faith in God that were going to be combined, that were going to help establish the country that we now live in. So yeah, you can't get away from that at all when you look at the history of our country. The second that I have, it's actually kind of two that I want to mention together, and that's John Newton and William Wilberforce. Did I steal those from you?
No.
Okay,
They're
cool.
great, though. Go for it.
So John Newton, William Wilberforce, I mean, I just feel like you can't mention one without the other, because Newton had such an impact on Wilberforce's life, to bring him to the point where, basically single-handedly he was able to go into Parliament and just, abolish slavery. To me, that is just absolutely incredible, and the epitome of, the importance of like good mentorship, like, here are my mistakes. Here are the things that I did. This is an evil in our land, and you have the ability to do something about it. And so you need to do something about it. And we had John Kratz on a few weeks ago talking about his recent book, and he went into this 10-minute explanation about John Newton. And if you haven't heard it, please go back and listen to it. I'd love to have him on again to talk about that, because didn't he say he's done some major historical work in paper writing on John Newton?
Yeah, he was right in the midst of it when we talked to him.
Yeah, so I'd love to have him on again and just talk more about that, because it was absolutely fascinating. But just John Newton's story, and of course, we have Amazing Grace that comes from that. But then, William Wilberforce, that next generation who, under John Newton's tutelage, just, sees in Scripture how evil and horrible this is, and goes out and just goes into the Parliament and, starts fervently battling this. And so, if you haven't seen the movie Amazing Grace, I highly recommend it. My wife and I love going and, doing the comparisons of, the real life story versus the movie story. And this very much mirrors the real life story of Wilberforce. And so
bring some Kleenex, people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amazing movie.
Yes. Absolutely phenomenal. And I love it because it shows us that as Christians, as much as we can, we need to be socially active and involved in the problems of our day. We can't just bury our heads in the sand. We do need to, as much as God allows us to, be involved. We look at the disciples, and the disciples certainly didn't tolerate sin, but they didn't have say in the things that went on. There wasn't a parliament to go to. There wasn't a vote to be cast in order to go in and change something. And so, it's different. They taught on, the evils of certain things and how we need to live and work in, the areas that God has given to us. And, that's what they did. And we see in our society today, we have a voice. We have the ability to voice problems that we see. And so we can't just bury our heads to issues when it comes to race or when it comes to sexism. We need to be active in that and involved in that. Now, to what extent, I think, that is up to each person. I don't know how great Facebook debates are. And we've talked about that many times on this podcast, but no, we should be engaging when we hear certain things about these things. I'm constantly in the classroom talking to my students about these issues and, trying to make them as aware as possible of the reality, because particularly as middle schoolers, they're ignorant a lot of times to these things. And so, so those are, the two that I just really, love talking about, and who I think influenced me heavily, particularly when it comes to social issues.
And I got two thoughts I want to bounce your way on Newton.
Yeah.
One is that movie, I guess, which is more about Wilberforce.
Right.
But it's called Amazing Grace.
Yep.
It wonderfully celebrates the story behind it.
Yep.
And yet, it's what gave us that Tomlin tune with the
my chains are gone.
There.
Yeah.
And I'm no Tomlin hater, but I think we all can agree we didn't need that.
It's funny because there are several that I enjoy both. Like, I don't mind singing that aspect. My chains are gone. I've been set free. I think the problem is we went too far in the other direction where most people, that's all we sing now. We don't sing the original.
Which means you don't sing most of the verses.
Right,
like there's a bunch to that song.
Yeah, there's what, 5 or 6 verses to that song?
I think there's 5. Maybe there is 6. Yeah, but you only usually sing 3, I think, when you do the
Tomlin verse. Yeah. So I think
I like
that's
when I'm doing Tomlin, man. I want "Lay Me Down" or like "God of Angel Armies" or something,
right? Yeah,
really new and happening. Not don't
redo the classic.
It was like, what was that Babylon Bee article? I don't remember exactly what it was, but like he was arrested for it or something. I don't remember. But the other thing I was thinking was you kind of nodded at this, but I think it's worth remembering that Wilberforce. He went to John Newton. He was like, I think I need to go into the ministry because I'm feeling called, to this sort of work, like what you're doing. And he was like, no, we don't need you in the pulpit.
Right.
We need you in Parliament. And, the idea that it's not a higher calling.
Right.
That's a very Gnostic view we have of things, that it's a higher calling to be a pastor or be a missionary than it is to be a lawmaker or a school teacher.
Right.
I mean, like, if you do it to the glory of God and you're doing what you're gifted to do, there's no higher and lower calling.
Right.
Granted, I'm not going to say if someone says I'm called to this, then that for you that's the highest calling.
Right.
And I'm not somebody who's so like hard cessationist. I'm going to say no, you're not called to that. I think that's silly. Yeah, if someone tells me they're called to the ministry, so they leave their job as a middle school teacher. Right. But if somebody in fact, I got a book just out now where this happens. Somebody says, I have this job that I'm really good at doing, but because I'm getting super intense about my faith, I feel like I have to go into the ministry.
Yeah.
That's, and if you read Newton's the sermons we have and about his ministry, this guy wasn't in the pulpit every week going, all right, let's talk about slavery and its evils again.
Right.
He brought it up when it came up in the text.
Right.
Because it was an important issue, and so you bring it up when you can and when it's natural, but he just preached the gospel.
Right.
And he said other people who are Christians are going to bring the gospel to bear on changing the laws in this land. And of course, they changed them long before we did.
Right. Yeah. Yep. No, I agree 100%. And that's actually been one of the freeing things for me, is looking at where God has gifted me in certain areas, because for the longest time I thought I was called into ministry. I thought I was called to be a youth minister, and maybe God would work me into at some point, being a pastor. I wasn't necessarily sure I wanted to do that though. And I spent a total of 3 months working as a youth pastor, and I was like, this is not what I want to do. I
don't want to spend the rest of my life blending up Happy Meals and making kids drink them for a gross out game.
Yeah, like, and it's not even that. There was a completely different arena in which youth group took place and where school took place, and I was like, I love working with kids. I'm passionate about working with kids. So where can I be used? And so there was an opening at my wife's school as a teacher, and I fell in love with that. I fell in love with being a teacher and being able to engage with students on that level, and again, like you said, it wasn't the expectations of, okay, we're going to play 15 minutes of this, stupid game. And then, now it's time to get into the serious stuff, or we're going to do the serious stuff, and then we're going to do these, games and stuff. It's, it was being able to just interact on a real level that was very natural, that wasn't natural in the youth group setting. So, I think, wherever you are, use it for the glory of God. So number 3 for you, Zach, number 3.
I'm going to do what you did and put 2 people together.
Okay.
And that's going to be Adoniram and Ann Judson.
Ooh, never heard of them.
So this is the first foreign missionaries from America, the first Baptist missionaries from America as well. Although when they left America, they were actually Congregationalists. They kind of straightened out their theology en route on the open sea there.
Nice.
But they we're growing up in a time when hyper-Calvinism kind of ruled the day.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I'm a Calvinist. I think hyper-Calvinism is far more dangerous than even extreme forms of Arminianism.
Mm-hmm.
I loathe it, and I see it starting to raise its ugly head.
Yeah.
And the same thing was happening in England. William Carey is beginning his missions work at about the same time, a little earlier. And he's saying, the Holy Spirit is inspiring me. We've got to go reach these people in these other lands who've never heard Jesus. And he's being told crap like, hey, God elects who he elects. If he's going to save the heathen, he'll do it without you and your efforts. Nothing but, very discouraging responses.
Yeah.
He goes anyway. And we all know that was quite a successful endeavor. And, about the same time in America, we have this guy. I'd like to tell you his whole conversion story, but we don't have time for it. He becomes a Christian. He decides he wants to go to Burma. He gets together with some other students. He's part of the first class at Andover Seminary, and they form the American Mission Society, basically. It's got some super long name, but it's the first American Mission Society. There had been missionaries to America, the Black Robes, the Jesuit priests and stuff, but this is a fairly new idea to be missionaries from America. And they realize that the War of 1812 is coming, because they're like, dude, it's 1811 and we're scheduled for a war in 1812. Essentially, you could see it coming,
right?
And they were going to blockade rather the ports, and you wouldn't be able to get out, naval blockades. And so he hurries up, marries his sweetheart. He asked for her hand in marriage with this letter that's like, I would like to marry your daughter if you're okay with basically me taking her to the land full of savages and dangers and Burmese pythons where she may be killed in any number of ways, and you probably will never see her again. And they take off, they go, and they arrive in India, and he thinks maybe this is where their mission's going to be. Finds that the East India Company, good colonialist, good in quotes, Christian in quotes, white people won't let them bring the gospel. We don't want you to tell these people they're made in God's image, Jesus loves them and died for them. We just want to keep on making money off this deal. So they're not allowed off the boat there. They're there for a long time. And eventually he winds up, let's just go to Rangoon. They go to Burma. He spends, we're talking about a genius, linguistically especially. On a boat ride, he once got so violently ill, they put him down with some other ill passengers in the hold of the ship. And to pass the time, he would think of a scripture from memory, translate it into Hebrew in his head, translate it from Hebrew to Latin in his head, translate it back to English, just to pass the time.
Crazy.
Just crazy brilliant. He sets about trying to learn Burmese. When he gets there, Felix Carey, by the way, William Carey's son is there, and he's just like, I don't know how to missionary, I'm going back. And so he gets them as set up as he can, and basically, starting from square one, they start learning the language. As he writes the language, as he learns the language, he writes a grammar, he writes a dictionary, he starts translating the scriptures, and he gives his whole life. He loses 3 wives, several children during the course of this stuff. He's imprisoned for a while, and just gives up he loses his life to gain it.
Yeah.
And to this day, we have at my church, we have 2 groups. We have a Nepali group, and then we have a Burmese group that meets there. And they tell us that whether you're a Christian or not, Burma, they have a national day called Judson Day. They celebrate this guy.
Wow.
And his wives and all the work that they did and all the sacrifices they made. And Christianity is blowing up there, especially in some of the more rural areas where it took a while to reach. It's exploding now. And I just love that spirit, because I know a lot of missionaries, and I admire just about all of them. But there's something really special about not, I want to do this thing that people are doing, but this should be a thing, so I'm going to make it one.
Yeah.
Even while people tell me that I'm wasting my time and it doesn't need to happen. That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing.
And of course, my church is called Judson Baptist Church, so that's another weird little tie-in.
Right. Nice.
You got a number 3, man, or were you on?
I do. Yep, I've got a number 3, and I'm going to mention these two. A lot of people might say, well, these fall more in the second category. I'm actually going to put them in the first category because they died before I was born, and so the one has been dead for over 45 years now. And again, it's a twofer because they really had an impact and influence on one another, and that is J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. And to me, again, you can't mention one without the other. Tolkien's influence on Lewis is what led him to Christ. And, you can talk a lot about the issues that they had. I mean, they were both people. They both had issues. Lewis was a pretty salty character. But even with that, he knew and acknowledged that he had faults that he needed to overcome. A lot of people will point to Lewis, be like, oh, he was racist, he was this, he was that. Yes and no. I mean, I think it's unfair to, take people out of the context of their time and expect a lot from them, and yeah, it was wrong, that Lewis was the way he was, but he was also a product of his time where these things were more natural and accepted. And Lewis himself even admitted that in the areas where he would have considered himself more misogynistic, more racist, things like that, like Christ needed to do a work in his life to overcome some of those things. That these were prejudices and things like that he held in his heart that God needed to still do a work in, and ultimately he would do one day. And I just say all that to get it out in the open, because I think it is important to realize that, like you were saying, you look at some of these, historical figures that we have, and they're all people, but that doesn't mean we can't look at them in light of the contributions that they've made to Christianity. When you look at mere Christianity, and Lewis's contribution in that regard, I mean, his argument, Lord, Liar, Lunatic, is just phenomenal. His reasoning and his logic when it comes to that is fantastic, and it's something I think we need to acknowledge in that. And Tolkien's contribution to mythology and writing from the perspective of being a believer, but saying, look, I don't need to write books that are expressly Christian. My views are going to come out in my writing because this is who I am. And these books are just beloved and treasured by both believers and unbelievers alike. And so for me, a lot of the things that they wrote, and going back, looking at the symbolism in Tolkien's works, I love the symbolism that he has. Looking at Lewis's works, both fiction and nonfiction, but particularly a lot of the nonfiction that he wrote. The section on the abolition of men, that section at the end in the appendix, is just absolutely phenomenal. Just, it's worth the book alone just to look at the different, what it does is basically takes the different cultures from around the world and does this comparison of the natural law and the moral law, and it just goes through a lot of those things. And how could this be all random chance? How could this just be coincidental? There has to be a unifying factor, and really does a good job at bringing those things together. So those are the two that I would kind of leave off with.
Yeah, I'm not even 100% sure what you're talking about when you have the big preamble about Lewis. I mean, I know I've heard people try and say that Narnia is, racist somehow. I mean, what were his skeletons?
Well, I mean, it wasn't so much in his children's writing, but there were, there are things that would definitely be mentioned in comments that he would make with friends. And I got a book recently. I'm trying to remember what the name of it was, but basically it shines a light on, Lewis and some of the things that he would say, and some of the more colorful language he would use when describing certain people groups and things like that. And that's what I'm saying. Like, we need to, kind of have a patience with people in time and culture where, yeah, it's not right that he would use terminology and language like that, but also understanding that he was in a time and a context where that's what they were doing. And I probably will get a lot of flack for this, but I want to be clear. I don't condone that, but it's easy for us, where we are now, to look back on history and be like, oh, you evil, evil people. And so,
I guess I don't know enough about him to know what you're referencing, but I mean, I have a big problem with Lewis's whole thing that I run with is the chronological snobbery, where you look down on people who came before you. And what's funny is you're describing kind of a reverse chronological snobbery, in which no, I guess it's the same thing. It's not reverse at all. It's looking down on him for coming before us.
Right.
And honestly, at the end of the day, a lot of stuff that I hear, mudslung at some of the heroes of the faith who came before us is, oh, that guy was transphobic. And I'm like, A, that wasn't even a thing at the time. And B, I don't think it's a thing now.
Right.
Flame me. I don't care, everybody. Again, over 40, don't care.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, and I'm not defending what he may or may not have said because I don't know.
Right.
But as somebody who was just dealing with the world he lived in, if he spoke bluntly about things, especially a guy who, you bring him on during World War II to speak basic truth and calm, help people keep calm and carry on.
Right.
He was like the engine behind that. He may wind up with some deeply ingrained opinions.
Right.
And as long as you're aware that it's an issue and God's working on it, let's show some grace. But those are two great ones. I mean, granted, Tolkien wasn't a Christian; he was a Catholic. But
well, I mean, we can't all be perfect.
Oh man, someone somewhere was shaking their head for a second, exactly, man.
I know. That's right. You got it right.
They've been shouting at you this whole time.
I know. I can't believe you mentioned him. What are you talking about?
Now, are we on to the modern day?
Yeah, the modern day Christian influences. So
someone you don't know.
Yeah, okay. Someone you don't know. Yep.
Well, for mine, it's going to be Rachel Held Evans. What? Good times.
Can I make mine Joel Osteen next?
Other side of the same coin.
That's right.
I would say that I would want to give this slot, if I'm going to limit myself, because otherwise we're going to go 3 hours to just one.
Yeah.
And I'm going to pull a Nathan and put two in one.
All right.
And say, alive right now, Keith and Kristen Getty.
Oh, nice. Yes.
Utterly, I mean, huge influence on my theology of worship, my theology in general.
Yeah.
And the way, the language of worship and the hymnody and just, I think they're treasures.
Yep. Oh, dude, totally agree. Could not have thought of anyone better. For in that topic and category. So fantastic. I'm gonna kind of take it one step further. We always do the bigger, better thing. I'm gonna basically just mention Ravi Zacharias International Ministry. The whole team that they have there is just set up and so well trained and informed for the purpose of engaging in apologetics, and engaging in the culture and just giving sound answers for the hope that we have in Jesus Christ. Why, we read Christianity, had Evan on, Christianity Doesn't Make Sense Anymore. I mean, their ministry is dedicated to why Christianity does make sense, why it is relevant within our culture and society, and not breaking outside of the bonds of traditional conservative Christianity. And so the work that they've done has just influenced me so much, whether it's Stuart McGrath, Ravi Zacharias, John Lennox, going on and on and on, through that team, everyone that they bring in to talk or debate with someone or engage with a group of students. If you just go on and YouTube any one of the ministry members and Ravi Zacharias himself, who is the founder of all that, just the answers he gives to responses that students have with questions, adults have with questions, the man's mind is just so unbelievably sharp and on it, and so. That would be the one that I would mention.
Now, I'm just curious. You don't feel a need to make any kind of disclaimer before invoking Ravi?
No. Should I? Is there something I'm unaware of?
Oh my gosh! Everything I hear about him is controversy lately, and it's nice to just talk about that he's a great apologist.
Yeah.
I don't want to. I don't know what's going on with it. I don't know at all. I thought maybe it had all been laid to rest and you knew something I didn't.
No, I mean, it's funny. I think I know what you're talking about. I did hear on the radio, there was a reference, and I think it was actually when he was on, about him saying something, and he was actually disinvited to a few schools to not speak. And these are conservative Christian schools that he was disinvited to. And there was one school, and he got on the phone with the headmaster and was like, "Look, we could sit down and we could sit down and take a test of who's more conservative, you or me, and I guarantee you I'll win hands down. This is what I said. This is the context in which I said it. This is what I believe, and this is how it was taken out of context." And
the thing I'm thinking about is a moral failing. So,
okay,
or an allegation of and denied. So,
okay. So I must have
hopefully
missed that
that's it's a time now when I feel like you're not anybody if you're not being accused of something, and
right.
I just pray that it's very seriously looked into, and that it turns out to be very clearly not true.
Not true. Yeah. No, I haven't heard of that. I'll have to. I would have to do a little more digging on that one, but no, I'm not aware of anything like that.
Well, one thing was, and this was a separate thing, that he had been putting doctor on his stuff for a long time, and a group came out and said, "You don't have a PhD," and he kind of came back and said, "Okay, yeah, you're right, and we'll take doctor off." Mm-hmm. I think he'd been given honorary doctorates, and a lot of people just append that to their name,
right?
But rather than come out and fight over it and stuff,
right.
He just kind of said, "That's not." That's not how I find my value, is that
right.
I have Dr. for me. And yeah, I've always been a big fan of his stuff. And there's something about we have a lot of people from the Nepali group in my church, and I also know a lot of people from India because very same part of the world, and they I did some weddings with some, and I love there's a few Indian accents, obviously, with how enormous that country is.
Right.
But I love the Indian accent that's got the British kind of underlaying it. That's what Ravi's got going on. I think that's one of the most pleasant accents to listen to.
Yeah.
Give me like Alistair Begg with that Irish lilt, and then Ravi Zacharias with his thing. Absolutely. And they sound like 10 times smarter just because they sound so much smoother. You know what I mean?
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember reading his works in some apologetics classes in my undergrad and thinking, wow, I kind of want to do this. But the call to pastoral ministry, it was stronger. But yeah, he really makes it look easy.
Yeah. True story. Do you have? We'll stick to two if you have another one.
I don't think I have one.
Okay. All right. Cool. The only other one that I was going to mention is actually who you just mentioned, and that was Alistair Begg. I remember listening to him in high school. Actually, came on in the morning, so it was in my morning drive going into school every day, and just learning so much from his teaching and trying to understand scripture and how it unfolds, and just getting so much out of that. I know a lot of people usually would go to like John MacArthur, and there are so many that you could go to, but he's one that just sticks in my mind so clearly because he had the sense of humor to go along with that accent, and so it was just the perfect combination.
Yeah, he used to be on anytime I would be driving home from an evening church meeting.
Yep.
He'd be on our local religious station.
Yep.
And it was a station that was like half the time it was like, just garbage, like, prosperity heretic people. And then there'd be Dave Ramsey in the middle of the day, which seemed to kind of be like the segue from the prosperity into the solid stuff. And then you'd have like Renewing Your Mind with Dr. R.C. Sproul. If he was still alive, I probably would have wanted to invoke his name here.
Right.
And then there'd be a couple other ones like David Jeremiah, and then in the evening you'd have Alistair Begg, who just, oh my gosh, I really keep meaning to start binge downloading and binging his sermons.
Yes,
but I haven't yet. I've probably caught 30 of them over the years, and
nice.
Loved every one of them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Nice. So then the last one is who do you know personally who has influenced you?
So long of a list.
I know.
I'll have to limit myself to a couple.
All right. I'll let you kind of go through yours, and then I'll go through mine.
My first one's going to be my old man for sure. Just incredibly godly man, incredible example of faith. As a father now, I realize that I learned so much more from him about how to be a Christ honoring, faithful disciple than I ever thought I had. You learn things from the memory of, he's not dad or anything, but from the memory interactions you had and things, not just when you live under the same roof with him. And then, he screwed up like any dad, not big, but when he did, I have several memories of him like apologizing and not just saying, "Hey, sorry, you know what, but you shouldn't have screwed up or you shouldn't have said that to me." Like actually saying, "Do you forgive me?" And like always rooting his parenting in the gospel and never afraid to talk about grace and it just super. I could never have possibly wanted to have a better dad. So that'd be one. And my wife's work phone is in this room for some reason, and it's ringing.
Nice.
And then the other one would probably be Dr. Mike Whitmer, who was my mentor in seminary. If you listen to my other podcast, Clinch, you probably heard me interview him.
Yep.
Excuse me. And just really helped shape my theology. In many ways, my approach to pastoral ministry. Excuse me. I don't know. I tried to, you ever forget if you're supposed to inhale or swallow your saliva?
Yeah.
Every once in a while I'm like, which is it? And then I go with the wrong one.
Right.
But so his narrative theology was just amazing. The creation, fall. But I was throwing some of this stuff at what's his name?
Yeah, Evan. Yeah.
Poor, and I'm glad I didn't mention Dr. Whitmer's name because he might have besmirched him to his 18 Twitter followers.
Right.
But he really gave me, I think, a great base for viewing the Bible as one big story, and then building my systematic theology within that.
Nice.
Which I think is a key to having a really robust theology that isn't just ivory tower theory, but works in real life. And you need that to be a pastor. Yeah. And, he was a missionary to China and lots of stuff. So I really, it was an honor to be able to study under him. I had a lot of other, I really could, do a companion podcast to the other one and go for years as well. And maybe both of those are worthwhile, one of each. Maybe those are worthwhile programs to do, but in the meantime, since we're real short on time, I will hand the baton to you.
All right. So I have three, but I'm going to mention two. I'm going to put two together again. One is the two that I'm going to put together. My pastor growing up, Pastor Steve Ludwig, and man who was my guidance counselor in high school, Mark Lester. both of them were just key and huge after my father passed away in helping to spiritually raise me and just kind of pick up and, show me, help me navigate through, those teenage years, and both just kind of huge mentors in my life. So while not biological fathers, definitely, huge spiritual fathers in my life. And even so much so that, I call these men every year on Father's Day just to thank them because of, how influential they were in my life and in my development. So those are the two that I'll mention together. And then, the third would be, Greg Dutcher. And
who's that now?
Yeah. Right. Who are you talking about? I don't think I've heard of him before. And Greg was just, it was awesome, because Joy and I had been in Maryland for several years, and just kind of spiritually dry for a while in terms of the church we were at. And we were just trying to figure out what we were going to do, where we were going to go. There are a lot of very, liberal theological churches. And so it can get kind of draining, being in, churches that are not doctrinally sound. And then finding CFC was just a huge breath of fresh air, and just being under his teaching has been phenomenal. So him not being on the podcast, I don't have to worry about him getting all blubbery and crying and all that stuff. So
dude, the trick is, don't tell him you mentioned him.
That's right.
See if he says anything. If he doesn't, he's not listening anymore.
Oh, honestly, I don't think he is. I could actually probably guarantee that he's not. Oh man. But
and
no,
Altrogi's not listening to the Happy Rant, right? Sure.
Yeah. Every once in a while, don't they get like a note or message from him or something like that? And they're like, oh.
I don't know. I don't listen to the Happy Rant.
Dude.
I know they had him on for the 100th, but
yeah, that's right.
When is there a big one coming up for this podcast?
Yeah, I think we're going to be coming up on like 300,000 listens. I think that's what we're going to be coming up on soon.
Episode number are you on?
That's a good question. And where my computer is up and running, I can't actually check that. So it would take me a minute to to get on and look up the info. I don't think we've hit. No, we've had to have hit 200 episodes at this point, and we just missed it.
That's great. So focused on the 300,000 downloads.
I know, right?
I'm bringing up podcast. No, is it 11? 11 podcasts?
Yeah, 11 podcasts.
What's it? Podcast.
So
and I thought that maybe when we have is this a secret that you're in high level talks with your hero Greg Dutcher to come back for an ep or two?
I don't think that's secret.
It would be kind of money if we keep him on and record one more to save for that big. You didn't miss it.
Oh,
it says right now on the Podbean page, 274,430 downloads. Holy crap. And 195 episodes.
Oh, okay. So 5 more to go.
Providentially, probably the 200th episode will happen with the 300,000th download, and that'll be the one that Dutcher's on.
Nice. If we could arrange that, that would be perfect.
Yes. So what I'll do is, if we're lagging on the downloads, I'll just sit there and just like download.
This is
using different. What do you have to use? The different servers. What's the word I'm looking for? What's the word for the thing?
I think it's just a different IP address, isn't it?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
There's some kind of good grief. I used to know technology. There's some kind of other server you go through. Right. Tweet us that. You two guys who send us questions, tweet me that answer.
Oh, nice. Well, yeah, because, all right, so right now you and I are actually, that's not going to quite be true because...
Proxy server.
There you go.
Right.
There you go. So yeah, that number actually won't quite be true because we have the one that the follow-up one we did with Evan. So that's actually technically going to release the week we're recording this. So that'll be 196, and then this one will release at 197, and then we'll have yeah. So we'll definitely,
and then we get Dutcher.
Yeah, we'll work all that out so we get Dutcher on for 200. That'll be good.
Now, do you want to also try and get Steve on too, and see how many guys we can get in the booth?
Oh, actually, that would be kind of cool if we could.
It would be.
Yeah, if we could wrangle up, maybe I could talk to Matt Smith, see if I could get him on. Maybe go way back, old school, get Jeff Krotz on, John's brother.
Basically, it would be like when they did all the epic voice guys on the Honest Trailers in one. Remember?
That'd be great. We won't do video this time. I do want to start messing around with video a little bit to see if we can iron out those kinks, get some stuff up on YouTube. But we will refrain since that was an epic disaster.
Well, I mean, luckily I'm super handsome, so I'm down for that.
Nice.
Just don't get from behind where my hair is thinning significantly, and, or from beneath where you can see my jowls, baby jowls that are starting to form. You got to get that like the angle that the chicks get with the selfies where they hold it up as far as their arm will extend up above their head, and then like trying to look like a lion.
Just don't do your Botox injections the day before.
Right. I apologize. I have Botoxed my face into an expressionless mask. I think we may have to save our boy Jared's question for a future episode.
I agree. Yeah, we got one from Tyler and we got one from Jared. Tyler, we hit yours. Jared, I didn't email him and tell him we were doing it, so he doesn't have to worry about that. But we will definitely save that for a later time and date. So we will get to it. Zach, dude, I think that's a wrap for us, man.
That'll do it. Yeah, another successful podcast.
What? All right, man. We're gonna go ahead and sign off now. We just rocked the Casbah.
These go to 11.